already know we have a good list, a good episode in mind for the people just based on, I'm looking over your list and I'm like, oh, this is going to be a good one. But hey, I was right. I did call it. We have exactly 5 in common so far for this one. I was 100% right there. So, people.
Yeah, 2001 was a good year.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the beautiful thing too about like the beginning of season 3, because we have these beautiful graphics that you assembled for us, I don't actually have to do as much explaining. I'm like, yeah, there's the Talkin TV podcast logo right there. There's our Instagram. That's what you should do if you're watching us on YouTube. And there's the title of this video. Boom! You did my job for me. I barely have to explain anything. I just have to show up and do my usual charming act. But for the people who are listening on audio and have no idea what I'm talking about, this is of course the Talkin TV podcast. We're on episode 2 of season 3. I'm Dom. That's Chris. And this is a little bit of an unorthodox episode, but it's another continuation of something that I've been having a lot of fun with whenever we do these lists, these flashback lists. We did movies turning 5 last year, a couple months ago. That list was one that we both had a lot of fun with. And like I said, just looking over some of these movies that you have, I already know tonight's going to be a great list too.
Yeah, man. And so episode 2 of season 3, but how many overall?
Oh, overall, this is.
You don't have that number ready to go?
No. Hold on. I actually do. Just give me a second. This is episode 69 overall. Oh my God! Why did you make me do that? I walked right into that one.
Yes, you did.
This is literally our 69th episode.
Is the energy we have tonight, fellas.
Were you actually trying to bait me for that one? You didn't know, and you're just playing along.
I know.
With it.
I knew.
All right.
That's like I gotta get down to. Listen, it's been a long day. I'm tired, and silly humor is.
Honestly, I need a little silly humor right now. So
exactly. Well, guys, thank you for joining us tonight. Let us know, what are your top 10 movies of the year 2001. We're curious. Comment, and maybe we'll read some at the end of the stream here. But we got a long show, I assume, tonight. So without further ado, should we just jump into this?
I just wanted to preface just with this about the year 2001. Obviously, a momentous year for everybody. It's ironic, again, that we're doing this year after coming off of what a lot of people regard as like the worst year of their lives, when, arguably, again, like one of the biggest tragedies and events of just U.S. history in general happened on this year during our lifetimes. And it's just still insane to me that it's been 20 years since that. And as far as the movies go, again, it's a year that clearly I can tell was significantly impacted by that event, because there were a lot of movies that were delayed when this happened. Obviously, there was just a lot of stuff that got pushed. There was people didn't know whether the Oscars were going to happen. But the other interesting thing about 2001 is that this is kind of a year very similar to 2011, where it's a year that like not a lot of people think about consciously, but as far as like some of the iconic movies that defined our generation and defined pop culture of the last 20 years came out this year. Like, it's insane to me, like, when I was going over, which is funny because I feel like the majority of movies that came out this year overall was surprisingly not that high as far as quality goes. Like, I'm talking the majority. Like, there were obviously the gems that hit, and the gems that hit were spectacular, but oh man, there are some
like
stinkers that year. Yeah, Legally Blonde I skipped because I'm like, I'm not gonna enjoy that, but like, oh man, we got like I remember like we got a couple of Nickelodeon live action ones. We got Moulin Rouge famously, which I can't stand that director. So famously one of the worst movies ever made came out this year. Freddy Got Fingered, the Tom Green movie, came out this year. So
wow, I've never even.
Oh, you dude, you got to look up that trailer. You have to look. Just the trailer alone is insane. Like, it's one of those movies like Son of the Mask where you don't actually believe what you're watching, and then you're like, oh no, this is real, and it just makes it that much worse. That's what Freddy Got Fingered is. So I've got
love those kind of movies, man.
Oh yeah, those can make for some spectacular viewing experiences. Don't get me wrong. So I've got my new Christmas hat that I got. I can't tell what that logo is, but that's fine. I got my alma mater sweatshirt, Oswego State, and I'm ready to talk about some 2001 movies. Chris, so before we get started, I want you to tell the people what you remember the most about 2001.
Just what, in general?
Just in general, yeah. I mean, you're a couple years older than me, so you just remember more from that time period. I was 4 in that year, so I barely remember anything from that year.
Yeah, I guess my first distinct memory of my life comes on 9/11. I was in the city. I was, I think I was a 3rd grader, and I was in my public school, And all of a sudden, it's like the middle of the day, and classes stop. Everyone starts getting picked up. My mom actually worked in the school above us. It's like one of those multi-decked city schools: elementary, bottom floor; middle school, top floor; high school, the highest floor. So it's like one of those 3-decker schools. What they do in the city, those giant buildings, old buildings, super beat up and all that. But like, it's the city; they're not really taking care of anything too well down there. And yeah, just getting ripped out of the classroom and going into the teacher's lounge of the middle school upstairs and just seeing people like freak out like I've never seen before. It was and then also I was in the theaters for Lara Croft Tomb Raider, and the power goes out in the middle of it.
Oh wow.
And we were just like, this was a few months after, towards the end of the year. I forget when we were seeing it or something, and people started freaking out again. I have like a lot of, I guess, traumatic memories of that year, but some of like the first really early distinct memories of my life come from this year. So it's a weird one to talk about. And another weird thing, a lot of my favorite movies, like in general, come from this year. So it's a really weird year for me.
Yeah,
it really is.
Wow, I'm so glad I asked that, because like I said, 2001, again, I feel like everything that happened to me before I turned 6 years old is all kind of a blur. I only remember like bits and pieces. I don't remember like anything really cohesive, because I was only 4. And I turned 4 in August of 2001, about a month before, obviously, 9/11 happened. It's really weird, because I think the biggest thing that I'll remember, obviously, is that my brother was born only a week, and my youngest brother is born a week and a half after that event. And like I said, that's one of those things where I'm kind of in that age range where I'm young enough to know, to kind of like remember certain things from there, but I don't remember the actual event, because like my mom, I know I was brought home from preschool. We had already been living up here. I've lived up here my entire life in our area, and I just know that like my mom specifically would not turn on the TVs and would not let us watch the TVs or anything like that.
And then the last thing I remember is at night. We lived in the Bronx, one of those old brownstones, like type of double duplex houses that everyone had, like the classic 2 houses in one. They cut it down the middle. The planes flew over, like the army was just doing flyovers, I guess, to calm people, but it really ended up freaking me and my little sister out, and it was even more scary because I was like, oh man, I just thought this day was over, and that happened. But hey, we need those kind of moments to get grounded. I would say, like looking back on it, we got through it. So.
Yeah, wow. Damn. So, traumatic time period, to say the least, for you.
Yeah.
Apologies in advance for kind of, like, forcing you to confront that.
No, I'm okay. But I'm just glad we came out the other end.
Yeah, yeah, to say the least. Again, a momentous year, a traumatic year for a lot of people. But again, some good movies that came out of there. So, like I said, it's
weird year.
It's so funny because, again, but like I would say bad year overall for people. I think it's safe to say bad year.
For sure.
And not a great year for movies. But the movies that were good, goddamn, we got some bangers in there. So, without further ado, you ready to get started? Are we doing the coin flip this time to figure out who starts? Or I mean,
I don't care. If you want to go first, you go first. If you want to go second, you go second. I'm just excited to get to it. So,
all right, perfect. Well, I love your list, so I mean, I'll go first and kick it off because my list is probably going to sound a lot more boring and generic overall. But again, like some very momentous movies that came out, a lot of movies that helped define my years. It's and it's funny that you mentioned a lot of like some of your favorite movies just in general coming from this year, because this is a year that gave me.
Well, this is also when I was like old enough to grasp certain things of life that I previously couldn't have. This was like my first, I'd say, really conscious year of understanding the way things work. So it's kind of funny how we're both coming into this at different points in our lives,
Yeah, definitely. Very interesting. Like I said, just my whole, with everything that's happened to me in just like the last 10, 15 years alone, it's just like anything before that is just like all kind of a blur for me now at this point. But again, like a lot of some of my favorite movies that I really, really enjoyed watching as I was a kid. And even if I didn't enjoy watching them, it was the movies that just like everyone around me that was older than me was watching. Like these are some of the movies that like, again, I would just randomly walk in whenever we were having house parties when I was a kid. And a bunch of people would just be sitting around the TV watching it, and I'd be like, "Oh, what's that? That looks cool." Just like some of my earliest memories of like starting to like perceive that there were other forms, other movies outside of what's it called? Outside of just the Pixar and Disney animated movies that I was watching, because which again is going to sound kind of counterproductive, because I would argue the two of the most popular and influential animated movies came out this year, to say the least. And I think we're both going to be covering them shortly. But my number 10. Again, the other impressive thing about 2001, two gigantic pop culture franchises that helped kind of establish the nerd mythos of pop culture before they even really became a thing were established in this year. And one of them is my number 10, that being Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. It's funny because the idea of just fandom in general has taken on such a different meaning today because of the internet. And it's always funny to think that, like, I considered myself a Harry Potter fan at a very, very young age, but I'm grateful enough that I wasn't on some of those chat boards early on in the day because, oh man, you want to talk, like, everyone talks about, like, comic book fandom and Star Wars fandom. Oh man, you should have seen some of the shit that I saw back in the day as far as, like, these diehard book readers because, oh man, they did not play around. I remember this is just a really special moment for me, and this movie in particular, of all the movies that came out and followed and turned this into the juggernaut that it is, and now we're unfortunately seeing the ripple effects from that with J.K. Rowling continuing to struggle for relevance with those god-awful Fantastic Beasts movies. But this movie is very special for me, obviously. I remember this is something that I shared a lot with my sister. She was the one that really got me into these. And these books I remember reading when I was a kid. Again, there's a reason why I still take all 7 books and read them and go through them all once a year. It's this movie, besides being an incredible adaptation, is also it's such a perfect kind of jumping in point for a franchise that is very much for kids, but also has a lot of those adult themes. And I also give credit not only to this movie, but to this franchise in general for being able to kind of mature with its audience, which is something that I think a lot of things from this time period have done really well. And yeah, back when Chris Columbus could actually direct movies, Chris Columbus directed this a decade after he had already directed arguably like one of the most defining kids movies already with the first Home Alone. And he took one of the New York Times bestsellers about a little kid who survives a dark wizard attack and discovers that he is a wizard and turned it into an absolutely beloved adaptation. I love absolutely everything about this movie. It adapts the book to a T. Incredible get with all of those younger actors involved. And again, it's so funny because we look at just so many movies that are made now that attempt to jumpstart these giant franchises. And you had this back in the day and one other movie, obviously, that we're going to get to. And this launched a franchise that launched 8 movies. And that shows you just how strong the source material it was that was based off of it. And I understand, obviously, that these books and this property are not for everyone. But for those who grew up with it, it definitely meant a lot. And so there was no way I couldn't not put this on this list. So Sorcerer's Stone, my number 10.
Yeah, this is the only Harry Potter movie I've seen. Maybe we have to do a first-time watching series.
Maybe, yeah.
We'll see. We have a lot of new plans for this year.
Yeah,
it's
that
the only
would be
one I've
interesting
seen,
to say the least.
And we'll see if it's in my list. That being said, my number 10 film is a little movie called Monsters, Inc. or Monsters Incorporated. Yeah, I really loved Mike and Sully back in the day, man. This film was just so charming. It was everything that I think I wanted to see at that point in age, because I was like a little bit of an older kid, and I certainly went to these kiddie movies even a few years after I was out of them, because I had a little sister, and that's just the nature of, growing up in a family. You got to do things for everyone sometimes. But this was one of those movies that it had something for me being a little bit of an older kid. And I actually have gone back to it quite often in my life. It's, like I said, it's charming. It's got a really good story. It feels good watching it over and over again because it makes you feel really just happy. Like a lot of films, they get so lost in their messaging, especially nowadays. Like, I'm really glad we have movies like Soul that are kind of expanding what, children's films can be. But like, we also should get back to some of the more like lightheartedness of just going to see a kid's movie and just having a fun little adventure and getting a little scared because there's something in the closet, but it's all going to be okay. Like, this is just, to me, one of the perfect kids films, and it sucks that it's number 10 on this list, but this is a really good year for me. Like, these are all movies I love very much, and hey, it still holds up. The animation is, of course, beautiful. And so, yeah, Monsters Incorporated is my 10th pick in this little top 10 list we got going on. Dom, what about you? Should we move into your number 9?
Yeah, I was about to say, we're not going to have to change subject too much because my number 9 is Monsters Inc. as well. So again, I'm not gonna say too much as far as adding on to Chris's points. My fondest memories of this is that for whatever reason, this was like my grandpa's favorite movie to watch. It was kind of weird. That was kind of like one of some of the early signs that I knew that Pixar was gonna have legs. Obviously, over the course of my life, is because I was obsessed with the Toy Story movies and A Bug's Life, and my grandpa was obsessed with Monsters Inc. And those ended up being the first 4 Pixar movies, and then it just kind of went on to there. Finding Nemo was the first movie I remember seeing in theaters, and pretty much echoing everything you said. It's so funny that you brought that up, like the idea of like it sucks that this has to be number 10 because yeah, I'm like, damn, I want to put this higher than 9. This feels like this should be higher than 9, but I can't justify putting it above any of these other movies because all of these other movies are freaking incredible. Like I mean, weak year overall, but like just some great individual hits. And I talked about this movie a little bit in my top 10 favorite Pixar's. My top 10 Pixar's Wars. My top 10 favorite Pixar movies revamped, which you can currently check out on the channel. This was just in that stretch of like Pixar had just had a massive, incredible home run stretch with their first 3 movies, with the first 2 Toy Stories and Bug's Life, and Disney came to them and basically expanded their 3 picture deal to like 5 movies. And so their next idea, one of the co-creators, obviously, and just one of the co-honchos, ironically enough, getting his start in the director's chair, Pete Docter, who obviously went on to, I would say, have the strongest legacy of all the creators at Pixar, and said, hey, what if we just do Monsters in the Closet? But what if the Monsters in the Closet had jobs and had to go and scare kids because it stimulated their economy, you know? It's so funny because when I rewatched this movie, this is one of those movies that I always come back to and rewatch like every couple of random months. I'll just turn on and be like, you know what? I'm going to throw on Monsters Inc. And it never ceases to amaze me still how funny it is, how charming it is, how endearing it is. Every single time Sully ends up falling and learning to care about Boo over the course of the movie is absolutely incredible. It still blows my mind that John Goodman and Billy Crystal were almost Woody and Buzz, because I just can't picture them anybody else as Sully and Mike. Those two have just become so canonically associated with those two characters. And also, I hate that people just go out of their way to shit on early 2000s animation, because obviously it's not as good as today's animation, but for the time, that is still some of the most revolutionary animation work, both on computers and hand-drawn, that had been done at the time. And Pixar was still at the top of the game in 2001, and it really sucks that another animated movie came out this year, which of course prevented this. This is kind of that weird step. This and A Bug's Life are kind of those weird stepchilds, in that they were kind of the only 2 movies that came out during that Pixar run from 95 to 10, where the Pixar movie of those 2 years was not the best movie, because Bug's Life, I feel got trounced. 98 was a weird competition year because Bug's Life had to compete against Ants, Mulan, and Prince of Egypt, and then 2001, Monsters Inc. obviously got topped by another movie that we'll be talking about later on in this list. But yeah, Monsters Inc., it's still incredible. It's still one of my favorites in Pixar. Again, a lot of people have talked about some of the more recent Pixar movies as being better, but this movie still holds a very special place in my heart. So, number 9. If only it were better than some of the other entries on this list.
Yeah. No, good points there, man. And my number 9 is Lara Croft.
Speaking of which,
Tomb Raider. I harken back to when action films had substance for this, and when action films were more than just, hey, look how much money we threw into this, and look at all these explosions. There was such good writing in this movie, and especially the follow-up film. It was gripping, and had those action cliches, but it to me did it in such a way that was refreshing. Even going back and watching it now as an adult and stuff, it still holds up. I mean, it has the same fun, and it has the same feel that I believe people go to see the John Wicks and the Mission Impossibles of our day, but then it has so much substance that is beneath the surface that actually requires some thought to understand the character of Lara Croft and to see where she's coming from. And it makes me sad talking about this film. I knew the day was going to come when I had to talk about this. And this era is the decline of the action film, because I think this is where they actually peaked. So everything afterwards just falls short. This isn't even the greatest action. I don't know if it's a series. They made 2, but action movie franchise. More than one. Of the 2000s, but they were all just so solid, and now we've just been inundated with just years of formulaic filmmaking in the 2010s that it's just not just nostalgia, it's a little bit of frustration talking about this one, because I would like action movies have they stayed the course that these films did, but what are you going to do? Great film, go and check it out and tell me if I'm wrong or right. I know it's a bit of a hot, controversial take, but now you guys know I do like action films, just not of this era of, in my words, schlock that we've been getting. So my number 9, Lara Croft, Tomb Raider.
It's funny because I agree with you, and I don't, as far as the action movies, I don't think that action movies peaked per se, because I still think we got some good ones, but I'll definitely agree with you. This is the decade where the problem is the 2000s are known because this is when obviously the big budget effects-filled blockbusters came in, and that to me is really what killed off a lot of the action genres. Only because like I think the biggest problem too, just with action movies in general, as far as what they've become, is they become about the stunts. That's the problem, and not the story or the characters. You know, like the action movies today have become, what is Tom Cruise going to do in his next Mission Impossible movie, or what's the latest crazy camera stunt that they're going to pull off. And the problem is that that's cool from a technical standpoint, but it doesn't make for an engaging story as far as I'm concerned, you know? And as far as this movie, I can't really comment on it too much on it specifically because I've never actually seen it, but I definitely know that like this is one of the few good video game adaptations for a reason. So
yeah, these games rip. So yeah, before we jump into your number 8 pick, we got some folks in the chat. I just want to say what up to Stranger Boy. As always, good to see you, my friend. Apparently, Drake and Josh is turning 17 today. Ah, happy birthday, Drake and Josh.
He's been on a Drake and Josh kick lately.
He has, yeah. Great show though. And yes, film fanatic.
It is. Thank you
same
for pointing
thing.
that out. Literally same thing. Guess what? Top 10 movies turning 20 sounds better. It sounds cooler.
Yeah. So hey, tomatoes. But thanks for hanging out nonetheless. Dom.
Yes.
What's your next pick?
Chris, I've only got one thing to say to you, and there's a reason why I'm wearing this hat, and that is that King Kong ain't got shit on me. Number 8, Training Day. Anton Fuqua and David Ayer's only good movie that they've ever made, and I hate to say that because Anton Fuqua has made some other entertaining movies. David Ayer, we all know where his career has gone recently, and it's so crazy to think of like all the negative implications that have come, not necessarily as a result of this movie, but from the creators of this movie, because this movie still kicks ass. This is one of the movies that I watched while I was up at school. I mean, it's iconic. Like, this is... Denzel was already a thing before this movie, but once this movie came out, this kind of just solidified. Like, put this in perspective, okay? Denzel wins his Best Actor Oscar for this movie. Not for Malcolm X, not for Hurricane, not for any of the other traditional Oscar bait movies. He wins it for this movie, which is absolutely ridiculous, but also kind of awesome, because like when this was so shaping up to be Russell Crowe's win for A Beautiful Mind, it's like the opposite of Stallone losing to Mark Rylance 5 years ago for Bridge of Spies. Like, and just as far as like, I don't necessarily know if this is an accurate representation of hood movies per se. Like, it's obviously no Boys in the Hood, but just as far as being like an engaging, entertaining movie from beginning to end that is led by an rock solid 2 performances, really, because Denzel is so good in this movie. He almost completely overpowers Ethan Hawke, which is what's it called, who is criminally underrated in this movie. Like, Ethan Hawke gets nominated for supporting actor this year, which I think is doing him a disservice, because to me, Alonzo and the power that he has in this movie does not work if you don't have somebody as good as Ethan Hawke in that role to kind of bounce off of him and support him and kind of control his manic energy. Like, I think the thing that separates this movie from a lot of others is the fact that it manages to maintain that tension of, okay, is he just messing with him in order to get him really prepared for this type of life as a cop, or is he like actually a bad guy, you know? And the problem is that even with all the hints that are dropped that indicate towards one of those options, Denzel is so good and so charming and so charismatic that you don't even care, you know? And it makes, and literally no joke, despite the fact that he gets the villain's death at the end, which he rightfully deserves, you still kind of feel bad, like when you realize just how helpless he is, because that's how awesome he is, and that's how awesome this movie still is. It's the last kind of ironically funny thing that I wanted to point out is the fact that the Dr. Dre song that played at the beginning of this movie has become iconic because of this movie, but Dr. Dre himself actually stars in the movie, and his performance is, yikes, not good. But other than that, Training Day, fantastic movie. Still, to me, Denzel's best performance. Yeah, this movie's incredible, and I can't believe that it turns 20 this year.
Yeah, man. We're getting old.
Yeah. Yeah.
Adelaide.
What's going on, dude? Oh, man. Thanks for tuning in. Oh, man. So many good choices there. That's actually like a legitimately great list. There's only one thing, and that's Y2 Mama is 2002, unfortunately. It might have done that weird thing where it gets like a limited theatrical release.
Letterboxd does that stuff, man.
Letterboxd does that, and it's so annoying because you know why? Because Letterboxd goes based off IMDb, and IMDb does that shit all the time.
That's what I use, is Letterboxd.
Right, but it goes based off its original release. But like with foreign films, it's really annoying because with foreign films, my big thing that I use to help it is I go based off of, especially if they were Oscar-nominated movies, I go based off the year that they were nominated for Oscars. And so Y2 Mama was unfortunately nominated a year later in 2002.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, still a great list.
Yeah,
regardless.
great list otherwise, though, Spence. Thanks for stopping by. But
Film Fanatics is Fellowship. We'll see if that lands in
yep,
our
we'll
list
see if that
anywhere.
comes
Stick
up. I
around to
have a
find
feeling it
out.
will.
And again, he has another discrepancy
away,
because
yep.
I wanted to put this film on my list,
Yeah.
but then you told me that Letterboxd was wrong about
Yep.
this. So it's frustrating because
Same
I agree.
rules. Yeah,
Spirited
same
Away
rules.
would be my top 2 of this year.
Yeah.
So I'm with you, Film Fanatic. But explain to him why it's not on our list because he put it.
Same rules as the foreign film. It's a foreign film. It was released, I believe, exclusively in Japan in 01, but it was not released in the U.S. until a year later in 02, and that is when it was nominated for and won Best Animated Feature at the Academy Awards. The exact same thing as Y2 Mama Tambien, which was an Alfonso Cuarón movie, which is still my favorite movie from him and my favorite movie of 02. And the reason why I know that is because that was nominated for original screenplay in 02. So,
yeah,
trust me, wish we could. Yeah, I know. So,
so he's updating his, yeah.
Oh man, yeah, perfect. I love it. Thank you for stopping by, Spence. You are truly you are the man.
Yeah, cool. So now let's move on. My number 8 film of the year 2001 is Jurassic Park 3.
Interesting. Walk me through this choice.
Oh, this movie's legendary. I don't care what anyone says. This movie absolutely was my favorite growing up out of the trilogy. It was clearly the most exciting. That one scene with the Velociraptor and William H. Macy, and they're just running around in that dark abandoned house, and then they finally get to that pterodactyl pit, and they're all just flying around, and they're just fighting for their lives. Like, this movie, the stakes have never been higher in the Jurassic Park universe. It was such a ride, man. I mean, no pun intended. This movie takes you on a goddamn journey, and I thought it was a really nice way to wrap it up. It did a really good job. I liked the additional casting, especially William H. Macy coming in there and really shining, in my opinion. Like, I thought he was just awesome in this film. I mean, he, to me, is one of the most underrated actors of, recent years, just because I just don't think he ever gets enough credit. And, it's just a fun film, man. I like my dinosaurs. I like my my fantastical adventures on that island, and they did a good job sort of wrapping this thing up and putting a bow tie on it. So what more can you say? It's another action movie of yesteryear.
A couple years later and ruined that.
Yes, I didn't want to get into that, but yes, that is true. Yeah, so my number 8 pick, Jurassic Park 3. Give it a second chance. I think you guys might get a little more out of it.
Here's the only thing I'm going to say about that movie is I've never hated that movie as much as everyone else did. In my opinion, still, there's only one Jurassic Park movie out of the 5 that's been made that's actually bad, and that's the most recent one, Fallen Kingdom. Like, the whole thing to me about the Jurassic Park sequels, the immediate sequels, at least at the time, is that Jurassic Park was clearly a movie that was never meant to have sequels. Like, it's very, very obvious just by the way the movie ends. Like, even the original Lost World novel that is the basis for the Lost World sequel that came out a couple years after the original Jurassic Park, even Michael Crichton has admitted that he only did that because Jurassic Park just sold so many copies. And Jurassic Park 3 is weird because it feels almost like it doesn't feel like a conclusion at all, which in a way kind of makes it better because of its small nature. Like, it feels like I'm watching a TV movie. So that's why I don't necessarily think it's a bad movie per se. With that being said, it's not even close to being one of my favorite movies from this year, but I still don't think it deserves the rap that it gets. Like, it's so funny. Like, just, again, the Jurassic Park movies are movies that we could spend an entire hour and a half talking about, just as far as, like, kind of just how interesting that franchise is when it comes to blockbusters, and it really just shows when it comes to things that automatically sell. Dinosaurs are one of them. So,
yeah.
Moving on.
I would like to do a Jurassic Park retrospective one day.
I would as well.
William H. Macy is amazing in Shameless Film Fanatic. That is a great show there as well. All right, cool. Now we're into the number 7. Dom, what's your number 7?
We're getting into some more of the icons. Again, this is one of those movies that is definitely on everyone's list because everyone has seen this movie, and this movie went through kind of like a weird kind of internet rechristening a couple of years ago, obviously with the Shrek is love, Shrek is life memes, which apparently have an entirely secondary meaning that I'm still not quite aware of to this day, and from what I've heard, I really don't want to know what it's really about. And what I'll say is that this franchise has certainly gone on to have its ups and downs, but my number 7 is Shrek. I mean, literally, you can't talk about this year without talking about the success that this movie had, almost accidentally, because this movie kind of not went through a lot of pitfalls, but it was still like, DreamWorks was still kind of up and coming. They'd done a couple movies by this point, but they hadn't really had like a gigantic hit on their hands. This movie obviously went through like a little bit of a pitfall with the loss of Chris Farley, who was originally supposed to be the voice of Shrek. And so So they end up making this movie. It's got a couple different writers on it. Two of the writers that are involved in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. It's directed by the guy who would eventually go on to direct the Chronicles of Narnia movies, if I'm not mistaken. And this movie is just a smash hit. Like, obviously, just from its deconstructive angles alone. I think the reason why this movie is as well remembered in the pop culture icon that it is because it is the movie that really established kind of DreamWorks as a brand overall, I would say. Because, like, before this movie, you had Ants, you had The Prince of Egypt, you had The Road to El Dorado, you had Chicken Run. They did a couple of collaborations with Aardman. But this was the movie that really said, okay, this is what we are. This is who we are. This is us. You know, this is me, for lack of a better word, to shamelessly rip off The Greatest Showman. Yes, thank you, film fanatic. That being said, this is still a great movie. I still really, really enjoy this movie. I don't think it's a perfect movie. I think it does have problems. But yeah, this movie is still incredibly entertaining. The voiceover cast is absolutely spectacular. Like, even the CG animation is still, like, again, really, really good overall. Like, I think personally I still like Monsters, Inc. a little bit better, but this is still like a wild ride. It's still extremely entertaining. The pop culture references, the little adult jokes and innuendos, they still make me laugh every single time. I recently showed this to my niece and she absolutely loved it. So much so that I even showed her the, in my opinion, far superior sequel that came out a couple of years after this. But yeah, you can't talk about the year of 2001 without talking about Shrek and just the tremendous cultural impact that it had. So number 7 for me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think in more mature circles, you can't talk about the year 2001 without talking about Donnie Darko.
Yes.
Especially because of its sort of checkered rise to cult stardom, whereas this movie was a flop when it first came out. It was absolutely hated, I would go as far as to say. Misunderstood, though, as I think a lot of us have come to find. I know this is another film that took me a few times to watch to really internalize and grow to love. And this is so unique, man, because I love these cult hits. I love the stories that always come with the cult hits. It just kind of adds to the allure of them and the attraction. But sometimes that's where the buck stops. But this film, is not that. It's not just the story. It's not just the fact that, oh man, you got to watch this because it's, coveted by so many people and then no one else gets it. It's like you're in the club if you like this. Like there's more to it than this. There's substance here. This film is dark. This film is manic. This film is absolutely insane. And I really do think that it set the precedent for like so much of what we're seeing now as far as like A24 when they really get to their more abstract, like darker style films. I think without success of these early 2001 films, Donnie Darko, and then there's a couple others, I know one's going to come up on your list later on, that started to challenge cinema again in a way that I felt hadn't been done for a while, because we come out of the 90s and the 80s, which were for the most part cut and dry. Of course, you have some crazy films in the 90s, especially with Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, but I feel like this is just like the next installment in those types of films that really make you sit down and think afterwards. And it's not for everyone, but it made my list because I see a lot of solid, amazing things in this film. So yeah, Donnie Darko is number 7 because I'll never forget watching it for the first time. It's that kind of movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I can agree with that. And at the risk of spoiling something that comes later on in my list, the only thing that I'll say about this is I read about, so I didn't get a chance, so I only watched the theatrical cut of this movie. I didn't get a chance to watch the director's cut, but I did some reading online about it and about all like kind of the expanded universe stuff and how that was explained. And I'm like, oh, I'm getting a lot of Lost vibes here overall. I'm sorry. I don't know why I keep like, I don't know if I'm like unintentionally taking shots at Lost or just like referencing it every chance I get, but I feel like ever since I've watched that show, I just haven't been able to escape it overall. And Stranger Boy actually did point out, yes, absolutely. It is one of Seth Rogen's first small movie roles. That kind of took me by surprise when I watched this, but I still have a little bit more choices to get through before I get to Donnie Darko. So I'll save the rest of my thoughts for that. But my number 6 is a movie that has gone on to become iconic, obviously in its own right. Spawned a franchise again in its own right. And it's so weird because like this is obviously I think this movie kind of falls into the category of being so perfect that people almost forget about it because they're like, yeah, it's good, it's perfect. But like this movie, first off, it's Ocean's 11, which is just a perfect movie among so many different things, just from a directing standpoint, from a movie star standpoint, from a casting standpoint. Steven Soderbergh, in his never-ending attempts to just subvert every single trope that we think of when it comes to just films in general in Hollywood, and just, what we think of when it comes to creators in Hollywood. Like, Chris, if you ever want to just, like, be entertained and just be impressed by what a filmmaker does, just look at what Steven Soderbergh does. Like, Steven Soderbergh is honestly better, puts all of us people on YouTube to shame when it comes to, like, keeping track and ranking movies and TV shows, and he books. Oh man, the man is a reader. Like, I'm like, dude, how do you still have time to film movies? But then you look at how short it takes for his productions now, and he shot a movie for HBO Max in 3 weeks and it's a movie with an all-star cast, like Benicio del Toro, Don Cheadle, John Hamm, Ray Liotta, Frankie Shaw, and like even more.
Master of his craft.
Yeah, the master of his craft, to say the least. And it shows because, again, Soderbergh had a whole 10 years, 12 years actually, in the industry, making a lot of really weird indie movies, and he really didn't come into his own until the back half of the 90s with Out of Sight and The Limey. And then the year before this, in 2000, he really makes waves by being, I think to this day, like the most recent still last guy to get a double Best Director nomination in the same year for both Traffic and Aaron Brockovich. And then he does this movie, and this is literally the definition of probably his most mainstream, most like for the studio movie. But honestly, like for how talented Soderbergh is as a filmmaker, when it comes to working with ensembles, and just the sheer talent that he gets for this movie, it's unfreaking believable, and I'll take it, because never before has a movie been a better example of just like the filmmaking process and the movie star process. And I'm sorry, I don't care if George Clooney and Brad Pitt and all the other tremendous movie stars that this movie gets are just relaxing. Because guess what? They're so damn charming, and they make Knocking Over Casinos just look easy, and they make it look fun just with their little merry band that they get together, all of whom would go on to obviously more famous things. Again, you've got, at the time, new and up-and-comers Casey Affleck, Scott Conn, who were both, descendants of Hollywood royalty, Don Cheadle, some people who were already pretty famous at the time, like Bernie Mac, and then again, some old-school legends with Elliot Gould and Carl Reiner. And obviously rounding out the cast again, Damon, 1 year before he would break the action role with Bourne Identity. You got Andy Garcia as the villain. Julia Roberts, who again is an actress who I've never been the biggest fan of personally, just because her type of movies that she usually gravitates towards are not my kinds of movies. Luke, you wish I moved to Canada. No, this is just a different setting, and I'm rocking the beanie right here. But this is a great movie. It's I go back to it a lot, and also weirdly enough, another entry on this list that is both an incredible first entry debut, but might have a better sequel that surpasses it, that came out a couple years later in 2004 with Ocean's 12. More on that later. But Ocean's 11, my number 6.
More on that later. Luke says, damn, funky new graphics. Yeah, man. Hope you like it, dude. We're, season 3. Time to step up the show,
Again, stepping it up.
Speaking of starting franchises, we've spoken about a couple of these already, and a couple still yet to come. So stick around and watch where they fall. Again, guys, let us know your lists. We'll gladly read them and toss them up on the screen.
Yeah, leave them in the comment. These have been great lists so far.
Yeah, no, for sure. High class we have. Our audience has class. With that being said, we'll move into my number 6 film of the year, which is Shrek, man. I loved this movie. My whole family went and saw it together, and there was clearly something in this for everyone, because I just remember a very happy and nice day. And I thank Shrek for that, because the parents could laugh, the kids could laugh. There's all these funny little jokes, and the cast chemistry and voice cast is something that I'm always surprised when people think can be achieved, because they're actors, they're still riffing off each other. It's a little more constrained and a little harder to do because you're not physically in the scene, so there's less room for improv. But like, a good actor can get any character and bring it to life. Look at Mark Hamill's The Joker. But I also do agree when people really freak out about this film, because I think that this voice cast really achieved like a legendary status. And look at the revival, like you said, the whole memes. I was going to bring this up. A reason why I think that is because this film just keeps living on in so many different ways. It's like our generation has brought certain things with it. SpongeBob is one thing that we've constantly just referenced in our day-to-day. One of my friends, Johnny, you guys know Johnny, he's been on the show a lot. You'll be hard-pressed for him not to reference SpongeBob at some point in time when you're hanging out with him. And Shrek is also another one of those things that I think they just did so well that we're just going to keep growing up with this film. And like you showed it to your niece, well, I'll show it to my little cousins, we'll just bring these films that were just so expertly done with us, even if they are just kids' films,
Absolutely.
because filmmaking is filmmaking, and it's got to be done right to have an impact. And there was a lot of movies that I've seen in this year, and Dom even knows that. Like, this is a decent year for me, and a lot of movies got beat out by 2 animated films.
Yeah.
Something was going on in 2001, and I'm really glad that it was happening. Yeah, who doesn't? Exactly.
Yeah, right.
No more to be said there. Shrek is a fine, not fine, a perfectly fine is what I was going to say, and fun family ride. And I'm really glad that I got to grow up with that film, man, because
Most
it means a lot to me.
Yeah,
So.
it really does. Yeah, just again, I love movies that I can go back to over and over again, and animated movies have provided for a lot of those. So now we're moving on. We're in the top 5 officially now, and this is where we're definitely going to get into some interesting choices overall. It's so funny just because I've watched a couple movies recently in order to prep for this list, and this next entry I actually just watched for the first time last night. And I usually don't like to go into movies that I literally just touched like the night before, but this movie really had an impact on me, and that should tell you, because I mean, obviously I've been getting just, since I graduated from film school, I officially have my pretentious film bro. As you can see, I have my pretentious film bro hat on, so clearly I have the authority to be able to say, yes, I watch foreign movies. But no, foreign movies are great, and they provide a lot of different sensibilities, and they just are great when it comes to expanding, especially, when people complain all the time about how, why do we just keep getting the same movies over and over again? It's like, well, first of all, box office money, and second of all, because American filmmaking, unfortunately, even though it is provided for obviously some of the greatest movies ever made, it's also can be a little bit restraining as far as certain stylisms, and just other foreign films just don't have that constraint. And so, my number 5 film is Amelie, which is a movie that was widely talked about at the time when it comes out. It's funny because I feel like there's not every year, but every couple years, there is always like that one like breakout foreign film that can like really nab everyone's attention. Obviously we saw what Parasite did last year. What's it called? With obviously it taking home like the 2 big prizes with picture and director. And the beautiful thing about just today, and the great thing about just modern day filmmaking and technology providing a lot of access to things, is that foreign films are obviously now a lot more accessible now than they were back in the day, when obviously theaters were really the only way to see new movies. And just for sake of how the industry works, there are just obviously not a lot of foreign films that are played. But the early 2000s was interesting because I feel like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon in 2000 really kind of opened the doors, and you saw like this one, that you always saw like one foreign film really break through into the mainstream. You just had it with Amelie in 2001, you had it with Y2 Mama in 2002, you had it with City of God in 2003, and then I felt like that kind of went away for the rest of the 2000s and is sort of making a comeback now. I don't remember when Old Boy came out, but that was another big one. But this movie, directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, is an interesting case because of all of the different types of world cinema that I've gotten into. French films are the ones that, not my least favorite, but definitely the ones that I definitely kind of got the least amount from. Like, obviously, French New Wave is one of the most powerful film movements, just in general, and one of the most influential movements. But, man, I love this movie. This movie was just so sweet, so down to earth, so charming. Like, I love how certain foreign films, like, it's so funny because this movie had the aesthetic sometimes that resembled Cat in the Hat, which sounds like really derogatory, but like if you look, Cat in the Hat actually does have like some insanely impressive production design, and I loved it because this movie had so many different elements from like different filmmakers, like a lot of bad filmmakers, like a lot of like bad Tim Burton movies and some weird Terry Gilliam movies, but like it managed to kind of take like a really traditional story and make it feel like larger and zestier and zanier and larger than life overall. Like just the characterization that Audrey Tautou just breathes into that character, and just kind of the little like games that she sets up for herself with just taking these like kind of nonchalant, meaningless just life activities of just like connecting with people. Like it felt very, very personal and very, very just like kind of resonant with me personally, just as far as like how I interact with people in society. And it's really, really well done. Again, this movie's very funny. This movie is extremely heartwarming and likable. Again, it just sucks because I find the majority of people here just, again, they don't like reading subtitles. And I don't necessarily blame them, because just as, somebody who cannot focus for shit, I find those things very distracting. But this is just a movie that just the story was so engaging and kind of enveloping that I couldn't look away. And it was so charming, and I heavily recommend it, not just for people who, enjoy foreign films, but for people who enjoy films in general. I think that this is one of those really special movies that everybody can get something out of.
Yeah. Good choice at number 5 there.
Yeah. I wanted to put it higher, but I, again, literally just saw it last night, and I'm like, all right, I don't want the recency bias to show too hard here.
No, I feel that. I'm curious to see as time goes on where it might change or fluctuate either up or down. Although I feel like it can only really go up. But
For real.
We'll get there. My number 5 film is Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring.
If I could just voice my opinion real quick, way too low for this movie, but I understand. I respect your choice.
It's just because the other ones just, I mean, they only got better in my opinion.
Yeah,
People like to say that maybe the second film was a bit of a misstep. I disagree.
I very much disagree with that.
I very much so disagree. I think that this was, I mean, again, something about 2000s era cinema, big picture cinema. Like you said, the shift was starting to happen, but what we still had was that old classic attention to detail Hollywood storytelling where every character is so fleshed out and so you really care about them. And a great way to make my point right now is go watch this film and then go watch the first Hobbit film. You can clearly see who's a symptom of their times in the best way and the worst way, because I think it can apply to each of those. This film is so special to me, man, because I watched this film like whenever something weird's happening in my life. Like I first moved to Brooklyn, there was a bit of an adjustment period, and I just needed Gandalf to just say, "You shall not pass" on that bridge. So that was the first film I watched when I moved out for the first time in my new apartment. And it's many moments on tour, feeling a little homesick, I would toss this film on. I mean, them when they were on Netflix, it was super easy as well. So, and it's just because it's like, even though they're long, even though there's a lot to sort of pay attention to, it just grips you in. It's so well written that every minute that it demands of you is worth your time, so much so that now I can't even watch these without watching the extended cuts because it just makes it better being almost 4 hours. And the cast, of course, the legendary performances of Frodo and Gandalf on top of everyone who's just top notch in this movie. This is the perfect fantasy film. I mean, don't at me because I'm not going to entertain that tweet or whatever. Just don't at me. The kids say it. I don't know if that's aggressive or not, but what I am aggressive about is loving this movie and making my case as for why it's only number 5, because this is a good year for me, like I said, but while we're still on number 5, my number 5 film is Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring. This movie slaps. And it's a great film.
Remind me later on when we're off the show, I got to show you a comment that I got on the review for the movie that I'm about to hit. It was certainly interesting, to say the least. But, I'll more on that later because, I just so many thoughts on that movie alone.
Some people...
See, I'm not the only one who thinks that spot is way too low for that movie.
Well,
but
stick around, I'll explain myself. Number 4 for Stranger Boys.
So number 4, number 4 again, we're starting to come around as far as the movies that intersect. My number 4 is Donnie Darko, a movie that I didn't really necessarily know how to anticipate going in because I'm always kind of weary of movies that have like kind of that cult hit around them because I never know how much of it is actually going to be like real versus how much of it is just going to be hype because I've been set up for movies that I've been very, very disappointed by recently. But I'm very happy to say that this was not one of them. This was a movie that, again, you brought this up before. This was a movie that could have gone wrong so many different ways. And in a weird way, it kind of did because the movie that people ended up getting in theaters in 2001 was not the original finished cut. And again, like literally, the reason I compared this to Lost before, kind of half as a joke, but the reason why I seriously do that is because very similar to when the creators of Lost were conceiving that show, this guy, Richard Kelly, had an entire book's worth of like all the different crazy stuff that he wanted to get into. And the fact that this is an adaptation of a book means that somebody was like kind of already thinking up this idea. And the fact that it's so funny because a movie like this getting made today, it would absolutely get made into a show and there'd be 15 million different little Easter eggs that would all be setting up for like different seasons and different spin-offs and everything. And I'm so glad that we could kind of get this as a movie because for a movie to exist like this, that is like kind of so tangential and so ahead of its time, not just as far as the concepts go, but as far as kind of like the music choices, the and like the characterizations, the casting choices, a lot of just filmmaking choices that could have felt dated, but in a weird way actually helped to progress this movie, I think, a lot farther than what it actually is. I think the time travel aspects and as far as like what they're saying philosophically, it's one of those instances where it could have so easily been so pretentious and so up its own ass, but it's actually not, and it's actually really, really fascinating. And this is one of the few movies that I watched recently that actually got me to like really think and really be engaged and actually be like asking questions, which normally is something that just seems so counterproductive. But like, I like movies like that because you know how crazy my brain is, and you know how I can't focus on shit. And I like movies that really can make me do that. And the fact that this movie, again, I watched the theatrical cut, which doesn't necessarily explain everything that exactly happens. But even by the end of this movie, I'm like, unfortunately, I am one of those assholes that can say, yeah, I got it. As far as like the whole time inversion and how needing to be in this one place at a specific time and the idea of predetermination versus free will overall. It's something that we're going to talk about a little bit next week when I talk about Devs, which is a show that even though that's a sci-fi show and not really like a time concept show, it still plays around with a lot of similar themes. But yeah, Donnie Darko. Also, again, I would say, yeah, I'd make the argument and say this is Gyllenhaal's breakout performance because he only goes up because he's got Brokeback Mountain a couple years after this. So yeah, Gyllenhaal's breakout performance. But it's ironic because I'm pretty sure the Bubble Boy came out this year too. So wow, talk about what could have been a hit or miss year for Gyllenhaal. But he crushed it in this movie. It still impresses me how good he is because again, this is a character that I could so easily hate. But yeah, Donnie Darko really, really impressed me as far as this movie coming out. Also, quick shout out to our boy, Christopher Nolan, who has another movie that definitely makes its way onto my list within the next couple of entries and was the one who advocated for this movie to go to theaters and not directly to television. So props to you, Nolan.
Yeah, thank God he did that, man. This film, I think people are starting to get it now, especially with Netflix, it being one of the first bigger indies to drop on Netflix. I think that really helped. And this film's a fine wine. You can't watch it just once and expect to fully understand it. If you do that, you're not giving the film a chance. Some things, some fine art is more than just looking at the painting once and saying you get it. You know, it's not how it works. So great example of that. We got Luke's list. Dom, you want to read this off real quick?
Yeah, let's see. 9, Princess Diaries. 8, Jurassic Park 3. Oh my God, what is with people's obsession with this movie? 7, good, Zoolander. Man. 6, Ocean's 11. 5, Fast and the Furious. 4, Philosopher's Stone. So you go by the European title. Good to know. But we are in America, and here it's called the Sorcerer's Stone. 3, Shrek. 2, Fellowship of the Ring. 1, Monsters Inc. Man, Monsters Inc. A lot of people's number ones. Like, I love that. I love that. Cool. That's impressive to say the least. But
yeah, thanks for sharing, man.
Yeah, I did want to give a quick shout out to the first Fast and the Furious. It's not my favorite, but it's still a quintessential movie. And again, another movie that launched a franchise that nobody was expecting in 2001. So just wanted to give a quick shout out to the first Fast and Furious.
Yeah, for sure, dude.
Yeah. So moving on, we're on your number 4 now, right?
My number 4. Oh man, my number 4 is a movie that I wish I could put higher. And just like I wish I could put a film that came prior to this higher, hear me out because I'll have good reasons as to why things fall where they fall. But my number 4 film is Amelie, man. This movie is awesome. Absolutely awesome. You need to watch this. You need to get over the subtitle thing. I personally never had a subtitle issue. I've been watching anime since I was like 8, but I get it. It's tough. It's certainly hard, but you get used to it. You're able to see what's happening on the screen while reading it. It gets easy, and this film is so easy to love. So you're really just depriving yourself of something you could enjoy so much by not watching this because the characters are so real. They're so human. She feels so authentic. She's got such an interesting way of looking at things. I love it. She's like the person that I'm like trying to meet like in real life, like just wow, where are you? Because like you stole my heart with this film. You're absolutely incredible, you know, like, and it's so charming, man. Like you said, like this movie is just so feel good in the weirdest way because of her worldview, because of the way she sees things. But it has this just really cool way of sort of deconstructing the average mundane day to day. And also, I think it is one of those foreign films that is, I feel, very accessible to not just the country that it came out in. So that's why I think it had such global success. And if I haven't tried to get you to watch it enough, the one thing I will say is the filmmaking in this movie is absolutely awesome. There's so many interesting things they do with the camera, the setting, the lighting, the way that they dress her. It's all so artistic. It all says so much about what's happening in the screen. And so, you know, just go and watch it because it is just the quirkiest, weirdest, most charming movie that I've really seen in a while. I watched this film 2 years ago down in film school. I had a little viewing party with a bunch of kids that came over to our apartment, and we chose to watch this film, and it was awesome. The discussions we had afterwards, we went on for hours about this thing, and I think anyone who watches it can talk for days on it. It's a great movie. I'm glad you liked it a lot. I'm really glad you liked it.
Nostalgic for film school, first of all.
Well, that's because this is one of those movies that, like, film school professors love,
No,
but I
you're
guess
right.
I'm trying to say that it's more than just like, it's not pretentious like some of those film
No,
school movies that film
yeah,
professors
and
love.
to kind of bounce off your point just about the filmmaking again, I just wish I could have talked more. But yeah, you're 100% right about just this being like the dream girl as far as like, yeah, it's kind of, I feel like I don't think this is where the manic pixie dream girl was born, but this is definitely where like we get like a lot of the quirks that like just again like that we see in those types of women in real life. But also just yeah, like the filmmaking, this had so many different filmmaking techniques that normally I would hate. Like I said, just like the snap zooms and the crazy camera movements and the weird angles, like so much time that I would just hate that in a movie. But this movie just pulled it off and made it work and just made it like have this like the again like it's just normal shit in real life, but it just had this like epic fantasy feel. Like it would just like do the the cartoon shot of like the CG heartbeat of like the CG heart beating, and you're like that so shouldn't work for a movie like this, but it does.
No. But to me, it's just because every decision they make is to inform who their main character is, and it's just that's why I think it's so brilliant. You know, so go watch it, guys. This film is it's a masterclass in filmmaking, in my opinion. It's so good. It's So that was my number 4, Amelie. Moving into the top 3, but before we do that, we got a few more comments. Stranger Boy saying Spy Kids number 3. Film Fanatic saying he forgot Joe Dirt. That would be one of his favorites.
Can we just forget about that movie's existence in general?
To each his own. It's not one of mine, but hey, we like what we like, don't we?
Yeah.
Monsters Inc. at number 2. Well, Stranger Boy beating us to the punch, but before we get into number 2, we got to give him our top 3 down. We're in the tail end of this thing.
Yeah, we did pretty good. Again, we're only like at the end of the hour with number 3. Usually, I feel like we'd only be on number 5 beforehand. But yeah, number 3 is a movie that honestly I'm kind of disappointed that like no one so far in the comments has brought up, and I'm still hoping that there's like that one surprise person that can bring it up. I'm just wondering if it's because of like all the confusion just around this movie's release date, because this is another movie where if you go on any IMDb source or anything, a majority of them will say this movie came out in 2000. It was in film festivals in the year 2000. It was released theatrically in the year 2001, and that is Christopher Nolan's big breakout success. It was not his feature film debut, but it was his big breakout success that officially established who he was, and that is Memento. What's interesting about this movie is that like almost every single other Nolan movie, at least recently, it depends on the concept overall, but unlike the rest of those Nolan movies, the concept actually does enhance the story, which again, like I feel like again the difference between something like this and something like Inception, like Interstellar, like Tenet, I'll even include my beloved Interstellar in there, even like Dunkirk to an extent, is that it relies on the concept to prop up a very flawed story. Even though the story in this movie is not necessarily anything groundbreaking, it's one of those instances where, yeah, if you had this as a traditional linear narrative, it wouldn't be nearly as fascinating or as memorable. And it's the fact that because it has the broken structure that not only supports the theme, but also goes along with just, kind of the central conflict of the character. Like, when a story can do that to me are the signs of a good film. And besides just that, Nolan showed at an early age that, like, he knew what he was doing when it came to filmmaking, because this is, even for 2001, has some very, very impressive cinematography. Guy Pearce's performance as this character, it's a very, very tricky performance to pull off. Yes, Luke, unfortunately, Memento is not 2000. Memento is 2001. It was nominated. It was fun. It was actually nominated for original screenplay for the 2001 Oscars. And yeah, again, it's so tricky because, again, this is a movie that normally it's a little bit confusing. Like, I definitely had to check back a couple times. Like, okay, so that happened there, and then that happened there. And the good thing is that, like I said, it becomes immediately apparent what the style is and kind of the two different diverging timelines overall as far as what they're starting. Again, it's the movie that showed us who Christopher Nolan was as a filmmaker right off the bat. I would also strongly encourage people to go back and watch his first movie Following, because even though that's a small movie, that's another movie that shows that, like, yeah, this is, as far as like where Christopher Nolan got his start. It's really, really interesting. It's a really, really interesting little experimental film that had a lot bigger of an impact than I think he or just everyone else was intending to was obviously intending, and I'm just really, really appreciative of that. It's funny because this is one of those movies where a lot of people will just come up and say, yeah, this is one of my favorite movies, and I'm like, really? And I'm like, okay, yeah. And the way that they explained it actually like made a lot of sense, just as far as like how he's dealing with amnesia and everything, and how a lot of different people can relate to them. And again, just showing that, like, yeah, Nolan was at the top of his game, like, right out of the gate. And it was a good reminder to me to show that, like, no, just before, like, kind of all the spectacle and the bang and the flash and the crazy time inversion in dreams and stuff like that, he could, like, just make a really, really solid movie about amnesia and use the structure of the movie to reflect that. So my number 3, Memento.
Yeah, that's one that I still have yet to see, but I've only heard glowing reviews from you and good things from a bunch of people. So I'm excited to check it out. You guys know how and where I stand with Chris Nolan, so it's not something I'm chomping at the bit to watch, but it also does seem like one of his better films in regards to someone with my taste. So I'll definitely check it out at some point.
This is going to be another one of those movies where I feel like all the rest of Nolan's movies that you haven't seen, I feel like I'm going to be really interested just to see your take on them, because you could either have like, I feel like with you, with Nolan, with the rest of Nolan's movies, I feel like there's going to be no in between. You're either going to have like a really traditionalist take or a really wild out there take. And I feel like I can't wait overall, just as far as the rest of those go. So
that's one of my personal goals for this year, is to finish his filmography. Right. So we'll get there. We'll definitely get there.
Yeah,
At
so
number three
for
me is Ocean's 11, man.
Hell yeah.
This is a goddamn heist movie. Like, this is just, again, it harkens back to everything that I feel about Tomb Raider, everything that I feel about the Fellowship of the Ring, just in another application, a heist film. Sort of like, let's get the gang together, let's go and extract them, let's make the coolest and wildest journey around this objective. But we have depth. We have characters who have so many different things about them that are going to play into the story. We have actual chemistry between the cast. We're not just relying on visual fireworks, or, fireworks more as an adjective in the sense of, visual antics to sell the story. We have depth here. We have a compelling script on paper that now just needs to be brought to life. And they did that, and I think that's why this film is so coveted so many years later. I think that's why it's warranted a remake. And, I mean, it was a remake, obviously, already. There was a film in the 1960s or something.
Yeah,
and
the Rat Pack movie.
But it's just, yeah, exactly. But, I mean, this was, I think, to me, the definitive version, just because it just, man, the chemistry is awesome. And it's like we lost so much after this decade. Revisiting this year and this list makes me really realize how much in the 2010s we got away from, I think, the heart and soul of why I fell into love with filmmaking.
Yeah.
It got to be more about the spectacle. That's what I kind of meant by fireworks earlier, guys. The spectacle became more important than the narrative. See, I like my narrative to be enhanced with some spectacle. In the case of Lara Croft Tomb Raider, in the case of Fellowship of the Ring, and of course in the case of this movie. But if we don't have that strong narrative, if we don't have those characters that are going to keep me in this to the end, I don't care. I don't care about Tom Cruise jumping on a plane in real life. Honestly, I'm glad he can do it. He's in shape. God bless him. He seems like a decent guy, but that's not what I want to see. I would go watch the Olympics if I wanted to see people do something that was physically impressive. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, I'm watching a movie to see characters and growth and progression from the page to the screen. And I got that with this movie, because years later, I'm hard pressed to find a heist film that feels as good as this one. The only other one is Reservoir Dogs, and that is even before this. So that has even more of the era that I love about these movies. This is like a dying breed, this 2001 class. We really start to see it deteriorate towards the end of this decade, and I hope people realize that we should stop settling for terrible art. That's what I'm getting out of revisiting this list. Stop settling for bad art, because these movies were awesome that we're talking about tonight. So Ocean's 11 at number 3. Yeah, we don't need everyone knows about like the movie itself, so I'm just talking about how it made me feel,
Yeah, screw Tom Cruise pulling off like the longest and most dangerous motorcycle stunt ever. I want to see Zhao Baoqin do a dangerous flip from the inside of a case to a shelf inside of a safe in order to avoid the lasers on the ground, because there's more tension in that one enclosed setting than there is to me in any of the Mission Impossible movies, because guess what? I know Tom Cruise is going to win at the end. I don't care how cool the stunts are in those movies. I know exactly what's going to happen at the end. Same thing goes for the James Bond movies, except for Skyfall. But that's a thing for another podcast.
Exactly.
But yeah, definitely gave me an idea as far as like future top 10 lists could go. Definitely a good idea. But I would definitely recommend Heat also if you haven't seen that, as far as heist movies go. Because also,
okay, I haven't. I'll check it out.
Oh, dude, Pacino in that movie, you are not ready for. Like, that could inspire a full like 2 hours of me just doing Pacino impressions. Like, that's the movie that gave us the Al Pacino memes. That just keep that in the back of your head. So
I got to see this then.
Yes, you do. I did that long drawn out preamble because I don't know if I'm just quite emotionally ready to talk about this next movie. Because again, I understood all your points and I agree with you on all your points, but I still will say that this movie was way too low on your list. My number 2 is Lord of the Rings: Fellowship of the Ring. This movie to me was the best movie that came out this year for a long time until I saw my number 1 choice. This is still a movie that, again, like, it kind of killed the fantasy genre in a way, and this is again one of many reasons why superhero movies came to dominate in the last decade, because just you see what Peter Jackson did with all 3 of those movies. And you want to talk about just a ultimate flex. Like, I don't know if you can get higher than just like coming off of the 90s when he just had like a really weird stretch of like these crazy B-level horror movies and like Meet the Feebles and Brain Dead, Dead Alive, and Bad Taste, to making some of these really kind of interesting and weird dramas like Heavenly Creatures and The Frighteners. And then you hear that he's going to direct this movie, and like the Lord of the Rings, I think the biggest thing that they were known for, obviously outside of the books, they've obviously been tremendously famous books and literature classes for like the last couple of years, but were the Ralph Bakshi 70s animated movies, which again, those are good for what they are, but like the idea of the Lord of the Rings is just stance in pop culture was born from this franchise and from this movie, and just everything that Jackson does with this movie alone. Like, you were talking about how, like, again, it's one of the few movies that manages to mix that excellent sense of spectacle with an incredible story. And it's funny because this movie's often, I think, been criticized. I mean, all 3 of the movies have been criticized in turn, but this movie was criticized the most for having like the least impressive story, which I couldn't disagree more with, because it is definitely a very, very expository movie just by its nature, because it's the first movie, because it has to set up so much just with the characters and within the world and everything, and the fact that you don't have, like, again, this is not now where, like, if you're making a property that's based off of an expanded canon or IP, you have like 20,000 Wikipedia articles and books and comic books and lore to do with. Like, all that stuff came out and became like well known for this. Like this stuff does exist for this universe, and it all came out and became popular after the Lord of the Rings movies came out. And I think the biggest reason why, besides Jackson's just love for the original fan property, is the fact that he treats these like movies. He uses original, old school, incredible filmmaking techniques from his horror days. Like, the reason why a lot of the scary shit in those movies still fucking freaks me out the way that it freaked me out as a kid, was because it is scary. It is scary seeing those Night Riders, and the close-ups that he does, and all the crazy like scenery. It is scary seeing those creatures and those orcs, and like how he relies on the horror aspect. You see the orcs before you actually see them in action. They talk about the troll and how dangerous it is, and he even manages to make the magic work. And the fact that this movie came out like only like a couple months after the first Harry Potter movie, which already I think did a pretty good job as far as how it mixed magic into the world. And unlike Harry Potter, which has to do this balancing act of being one half in our world, but kind of having this underground magical world, Lord of the Rings, you're fully encased into this fantasy adventure. And it was weird because the early 2000s was also that strange period where you had like a couple of these weird period pieces and Sword and Sandals movies. Like the Sword and Sandals movies, again, they had a little bit of a success with Gladiator, and then you had Troy a couple years later, and then the Sword and Sandals movie kind of died out, and a lot of the most recent ones have been really, really bad. But this movie just kind of was the pinnacle of so many different things, and obviously it led to one of the highest grossing trilogies in the world, one of the highest grossing movie franchises still to this day in this world. And again, just Jackson ultimately, I think, peaking after these movies just shows, with the Hobbit movies. Like, I liked the King Kong movie that he did after this, and the Lovely Bones is still a really strange choice for him, especially because I'm just assuming that people just always associated that he would be doing big budget spectacle fare like this for the rest of his career. And now he's doing the new Beatles documentary, which I sent you the clip of.
Cannot wait.
That's coming out this year, which is probably going to be insane. And just so many things now that we have from a visual standpoint now were accomplished because of things that happened in this movie, and that's not even getting into the characters. I could gush all day long and all night about how much I love this movie. All the casting was done so perfectly to a T. Like, again, like Sam, Gandalf, Frodo, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Merry, Pippin, Elrond, Saruman, the list goes friggin' on. Fellowship of the Ring is awesome. It's one of the best movies. It's, again, all 3 of these, I regard all 3 of these movies as being just like one incredible cinematic experience, and it's like one of the greatest cinematic experiences ever completed. So, Fellowship of the Ring, very, very high for me.
Yeah. Good points, man. Good points about that. So, we are going to keep plucking away here.
Yes,
My number 2 film is one of my favorite movie trilogies of all time. It is one of the greatest films in of any trilogy. Out of all the trilogies, this is one of the best installments in a trilogy because it rode off the success of the first one without playing into it too much. It offered so much more in the second one. So let's get into it, guys. Rush Hour 2.
Yeah.
This movie is absolutely incredible. The chemistry between Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker is next level. These two came together in such a beautiful way in the first one that you never thought they'd be able to top it. And they really do. I mean, okay, so thinking about this era, talking about all these entries, my sentiment is the same. But now we have this buddy cop formula. And again, do you notice that all the films that I hate in the 2010s are the film genres that I loved in the 2000s?
Yes, I have noticed that.
And this is why. It's because there are actual stakes in this movie. If Lee and Chris Tucker's character, who I'm forgetting his name right now, but I just remember he's fucking hilarious and that's all I need to know. If they don't get their act together, they're not going to get the job done. The gang's going to take over and a lot of people are going to get hurt and a lot of bad things are going to happen. And they have this way in this movie where they separate them in the middle and they come together and it all feels so real. The stakes are so high. And it's just because like this trilogy, as silly as it is, they're ripping towels off people in salons and they're fighting and they're running through the street of I think it's Hong Kong naked, and they're singing Michael Jackson in a karaoke bar, but they're only doing that because they're undercover and they are so good at their job that they know how to really just take every situation they're in, and even if it's silly, because they are silly, they're pushing the plot forward in a meaningful and enjoyable way. There's actually a really deep and interesting sort of criminal element to these films. And there's actually some interesting moral decisions that each character needs to make. And it's crazy that a movie this silly can actually really get that deep when you look at it. Plus, the choreography is awesome. I mean, this movie, they didn't spare any expenses. The set design is great. You're really sucked into this world, man. And then the most important part, the comedy is so impactful. And it's not dated. If you go back and watch this, it's still funny. Yes, it has that early 2000s charm when the world was a little less strict. And so maybe it doesn't hold up in every aspect to the tune of what today's standards are. But it most certainly isn't because it's corny. It's because that these jokes actually take risks and they're funny. And so this film is, I don't know why this series isn't as revered as I think it should be, but God damn it, I'm going to be the guy to not let people forget about it, because even the third film, which I think a lot of huge Rush Hour fans would say isn't the greatest, it's still an awesome way to wrap up a trilogy. I mean, they knocked these things out of the park, man. I hearken back to a time when I could look forward to seeing a Rush Hour film in theaters. And go and check this out if you haven't. It's a wild ride. It really is.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen any of the Rush Hour movies, unfortunately. I do just harken back and miss the days when you could actually see a really good comedy in theaters, because even before COVID shut movie theaters down, like, one of the things that I really did miss was not getting to see a comedy movie in theaters, and when I did, just not getting the same type of chuckles and amusement that I normally would get out of it. It just, again, it makes me even kind of more look back with even more nostalgia in 2018 which I would say is probably the last year where I got not one but two mid-budget level comedies in theaters that like really, really made me laugh with Game Night and Tag. But yeah, no, I can definitely agree with your sentiments as far as Rush Hour 2. Again, I haven't seen any of these movies, so I don't want to be that guy and comment, but again, higher than Fellowship of the Ring. Okay, it's your list.
I would love for you to do a first time watching. At some point.
I would be down for that. I would definitely be down for that. Yeah, because again, like
I want to document
it's interesting. Like I said, because I mean, have I really made my relationship with comedies in general apparent to you? I feel like I've hinted at it a lot.
Sitcoms more so than films, but hey, this is the beauty of doing this podcast. We get to keep knowing each other.
It's funny because I made fun of a lot of the guys from like the late, I would definitely say like the late 2000s, early 2010s is probably the one where I watched the most amount of comedies, even though again, like I've made it clear my favorite types of comedies are parodies mostly. Mostly because those are just the ones that, like, to me, I've appealed to my sense of humor the most. But, like, I still like a lot of the, even though I've kind of shit on some of the stars recently, I still like a lot of the late 2000s stoner comedies that we got. But yeah, the early 2000s is an interesting period because that's a period that, again, it's a period full of comedies that I know a lot about and that have had a tremendous influence, but I haven't seen most of them, you know? But it was definitely a time period where comedies would either really hit or really miss. But yeah, the Rush Hour ones would definitely make for an interesting set of videos as far as me reacting to them. But yeah, so
number one picks.
Number one picks. So
before we get in there,
yeah,
thank you guys for hanging with us in the chat. Stranger Boys is Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius.
True best movie of this year, Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius.
I do want to say that movie slaps. It unfortunately didn't make the cut, but it does come in at number 14 for me on my list, and I've seen quite a few films from this, so it's up there for me, Stranger Boy. But unfortunately, it's not number one. But speaking of number ones,
I have not had the privilege of watching that movie in its entirety, but I remember the sequence from that movie where Jimmy turns all the carnival rides into like spaceships, and I remember that being very amusing and really, really impressive for
I'll just
Nickelodeon
never forget,
level animation.
What was his name? Carl? I'm peeing in the shower. I'll never forget that, man. So
good times growing up. Getting me so nostalgic. So again, before we stay wrapped up in nostalgia land forever, let's wrap it up with a movie that still to this day, even though I have it as my number one, I still don't actually know whether this even qualifies as a movie because it's just in the realm of just David Lynch's insanity. And this was one of the last movies that he directed. And before he just went off and just did whatever he wanted. So he went back to painting and making music. And then he did the Twin Peaks revival or whatever that was. And he did that, like, what was it? He did like that Netflix special where it's just him talking with a monkey, with a toy monkey for a certain amount of time. And yeah, it's, what's it called? It's Mulholland Drive is my number one. It's, oh man, it's a movie that I watched the first time. It took me a couple times to get through this. I'm like, I have no idea what this is, but it's awesome. Like, oh, it's so weird whenever you talk about a David Lynch movie because the easy go-to answer is to say, oh, it's dreams, man. It's all about just capturing the sense of dreams. And I don't want to, at the risk of sounding like too much of a pretentious douchebag, it's not quite that. Like, these movies do have stories involved with them. It's just they're so non-conventional and they're so like, it's such atypical because it's a movie where the characters in it of themselves don't really seem interested in what's going on, but it's still so fascinating, just like all the little side things that he puts in there and all the little like side characters that they do mean a lot, but at the same time they don't. And I love movies that can create a feeling overall, you know, like I love movies with strong characters that I can latch onto, but I also like these weird kind of otherworldly movies that like feel like a trip. And like the Naomi Watts and the other girl, I think it's Lauren San Giacomo, but I'm not sure. And just kind of the quest they go on in the movie, and then halfway through the movie inverts. It's funny because I actually watched his movie Lost Highway that came out a couple years ago, and this was like part of like a trilogy of movies that he did that was set in Los Angeles and kind of wrapped up with Inland Empire. And Inland Empire is fascinating because that's when he was really starting to mess around with digital technology, which was digital filmmaking, which was still at the time very new. But man, this movie, like, I don't even know where to begin. Just like everything. It's funny because this is the movie that I feel like was trying to expose the underbelly of Los Angeles before that was even really a thing. And again, he started with that in Lost Highway, but Lost Highway still had like somewhat of a conventional structure, at least in first. That movie really doesn't go crazy until like the last act, I would say. But this movie is just, from the opening scene, you're just like, what is happening? And you're following these characters, but the characters are unreliable. But I still can't help but be completely enraptured by everything that I'm watching. It is the definition of a film experience to me. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it in my lifetime. I don't think I ever will see anything like it in my lifetime. It's just, I love how his movies can be about, it's literally, I compare them to Seinfeld. They're about nothing, but at the same time, like, don't those make for like some of the best movies overall? Just the movies that are just about people experiencing different things. You know, I feel like it's another reason why people like Terrence Malick, but I have a feeling that I'm going to have a different reaction to Malick's works than Lynch's works. Like, Lynch is a guy, every single movie I know when I watch him, I'm going to get an experience, and I wouldn't trade them for anything. So, Mulholland Drive, my number one. My favorite movie of this year. Is it the best movie? I have no idea, but it's certainly the most memorable movie I saw from this year.
Yeah, for the record, I just watched this one last night, same as Don with Amelie, and I want to add it to my list because I see so much in it, but I think with this kind of film, it's disrespectful to the film and how much it begs you to think about to put it in my top 10. So I just want to let everyone know that I really like it. I just don't know how that's going to sit with me. And I think that this is the type of film you need to take some breathing room with. So couldn't add it in my top 10, but I did see it. And this is a really dynamic year. Who knows? Maybe we'll touch upon this year again throughout 2021 because these movies, like I said earlier, they slap, you know?
Yeah.
This
really
is a solid year.
Yeah. So what's your number one for this year?
Yeah. So for me, my number one film is, this movie, I've seen this movie so many times, dude, and it never gets old. It's a Ridley Scott film, and it's not Alien. It's Black Hawk Down. It is, goddamn, this film, dude. I mean, I think, and this is why I kind of wanted to say that at the beginning of the podcast about my like experience as a little kid and growing up in the city when 9/11 went down. I think that this film kind of captures the tone of where the world was at that point in time from such a way where it shows you both sides, which I thought was actually really interesting because as much as I love a lot of war films throughout history, I do feel that they're one-sided. And I don't really feel that we kind of get the perspective of, the non-Western side. You know what I mean? I think that this film actually shows an empathy in a war film that most don't, whether they don't care to or whether they just simply can't, because I think the filmmaking in this movie is so expertly done that it really is why it stands out to me. And on top of that, these guys, this squad, the Black Hawk Down squad, they feel their chemistry is so freaking real. That one scene at the end, I can see, it's one of the few movie scenes where I can literally see so vividly in my eyes where he's man down. He's like, I'll hold him off. You guys escape. I'm done for. I've been shot so much. And he's with that pistol and he's just such a good marksman that he's able just to hold them off, but they just keep coming almost like a horde. And it's just such a melancholic moment to end that film because you're happy that your heroes got away, but it's war, so there's consequences. And again, dude, this decade, this taking all of the years beforehand, all of the great movies, being able to soak up the Platoons and the Full Metal Jackets of the world and just take those and now apply it to a more modern conflict, but also introduce an empathy that I think you can only get from this decade as we've seen like the world start to change socially. It's like one of the perfect war films for me because it's such a fair film. And if you're talking about realism and things that actually happen, I think that is important. And then let's just get to more of like a popcorn goer experience. This movie has it all. I mean, this movie has amazing action. The stakes have never been higher. And it's like, it blows my mind that it's 2001 because it really feels the filmmaking, the visuals, like it, if you don't notice the grain from, the digital cameras really starting to take over, if you can see past that, you think that this came out 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, It's just overall a solid freaking movie. Ridley Scott, man, dude's got depth. He really doesn't hit the mark all the time, but he's got some solid films under his belt, and I do respect that he's very diverse in regards to that. So, yeah. With that being said, that's my number one, Black Hawk Down.
As far as my thoughts on this movie go, I wish I could have liked it as much as you did. I definitely think it was probably like a zeitgeist moment, and the fact that I didn't watch this movie at the time or like around that time. I watched this movie again. Like I only watched this like a couple weeks ago, like a full 20 years after this came out. I like this movie, and I think that this movie is incredibly influential as far as its effect on future movies of this ilk. There are points that kind of remind me that this is a movie of its time. And the problem also is that this movie kind of falls into the trap for me of having so many people who are now such famous movie stars that I kind of get distracted by, okay, I recognize that guy, and then like kind of they become interchangeable once like the war gets going. And that becomes a little bit distracting for me overall. And it kind of makes it hard for me to latch onto their characters, but it's still an incredibly well-made movie. And definitely, again, like I've seen like the seeds for like Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30 and like pretty much every, modern day Catherine Bigelow war movie. Like it's all definitely there in that movie. This movie definitely still had an impact. It shows, Ridley Scott knows what he's doing as a filmmaker and shows that he still has just as much gusto as he did 20 years ago, because today, at 83 years of age, supposedly he's got 2 movies coming out in the year 2021. So that shows you. That shows you. He is still working. He is still working hard overall. So now, people, before we get out of here, we're gonna do something a little bit. No, Luke, trust me, I would be flipped out too. But no, Gladiator, summer of 2000. So you're safe with that movie as far as 2000. But yeah, so we're gonna do a little something different that I wanted to do as far as this video goes, which is that we're gonna take our respective top 10 lists and we're gonna combine them. If you guys aren't familiar with this format, I know this has been done on a couple of different podcasts. Basically, we just take all of our podcast entries, we take the ones that we have in common, which again, I was 100% right. We had 5 entries in common overall, and then we'll just kind of basically mix and match and intermingle and figure out which ones of the other 5 individual ones that are different that we want on our list. So just a quick recap overall, my top 10 from this year. Number 10. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Number 9, Monsters, Inc. Number 8, Training Day. Number 7, Shrek. Number 6, Ocean's 11. Number 5, Amelie. Number 4, Donnie Darko. Number 3, Memento. Number 2, Fellowship of the Ring. And number 1, Mulholland Drive. And Chris's top 10. Number 10, Monsters, Inc. Number 9, Lara Croft, Tomb Raider. Number 8, Jurassic Park 3. Number 7, Donnie Darko. Number 6, Shrek. Number 5, Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. Number 4, Amelie. Number 3, Ocean's 11. Number 2, Rush Hour 2. And number 1, Black Hawk Down. So, Chris, we have 5 entries in common. We've got Ocean's 11, Fellowship, Shrek, Donnie Darko, and Monsters, Inc. in common. So those 5, I think it's safe to say, are locks for the list. Now, as far as the other 5 go, I'm just going to have those.
I mean, I would toss Mulholland Drive in there, though.
You would? Okay.
I think it's really going to grow on me. I can tell. It's just to put it in the list, like I said, now would be disrespectful, because I want to justify why it's in a spot, and this movie's it's going to take a little while to digest,
Yes, Mulholland, and then in that respect, I'll throw Black Hawk Down on there, because even though it's not, again, it's your number 1 choice for a reason. Even though it wasn't one of my favorites, I still respect and understand like its influence and legacy, and I understand that it is like a very important movie from that year. So I'll put Black Hawk Down on there.
I also think we should put Spy Kids on there too.
Combined, dude. If it's not in either of our lists, it doesn't go on there. That's not how that works.
Well, that's all right. That's an honorable mention.
Yeah, that's an honorable mention. Don't get me wrong. Spy Kids. I've also got a couple. We also got to give a shout out to the movies that we haven't, or that I know a couple that you've seen but are not a fan of, but that I have not seen. Zoolander, obviously, still a tremendous movie. Blow, starring Johnny Depp. Gosford Park, In the Bedroom. Unfortunately, for better or for worse, Moulin Rouge. I can't stand Baz Luhrmann as a director, but there are a lot of people who like that movie overall. And again, a lot of the other entries that everyone else on the list brought up. Again, some really interesting ones that I wanted to point out. Again, Hedwig and the Angry Inch, Princess Diaries, the first Fast and the Furious movie. What's it called? Atlantis, The Lost Empire, too. Super underrated Disney animated movie. The early 2000s, almost like the forgotten decade for Disney, but there's still some really, really good movies that came out. So
jumping back to our combined list, I would also put the first Harry Potter film on there.
You would?
Because of its cultural impact.
Got it. So Harry Potter.
Although it wasn't my style at the time, it certainly didn't get me to go back and watch any of the other ones. I did end up making my way to the 5th film just on a hangout with friends one time, but I don't really remember it. It was just kind of, okay, we're really going to just, go to this party and get some food afterwards, but we're going to start at the theater. Whatever, I'm here. I'll try and make the best of it. But I mean, you can't deny the impact of the Harry Potter films.
Oh, absolutely. So that gives us 8. So that leaves us with 2 open spots. So from your list, I'd like to put on Lara Croft. As far as only because, and the reason why I go with that, I was between that and Rush Hour 2, but and even though I know you like Rush Hour 2 more, the reason why I go with Lara Croft is because I feel like Lara Croft kind of did more for its respective genre, and the fact that it's still such a limited genre when it comes to just overall good movies, and the fact that movie was as impactful as it was, versus Rush Hour 2 is a sequel, and even though, like, I don't know, would you consider it as a sequel that's better than the original?
Yes, this is the defining film in the trilogy.
Got it.
It was the highest grossing. It certainly had the highest cultural relevance. I mean, this movie's so quotable if you see it. It's got all the famous lines like, "Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?" Like, that is this film. The first one laid the groundwork. So that's kind of why I would argue Rush Hour over Lara Croft, but
Okay.
I mean, I think that they're both important
Ooh, yeah,
to
'cause those
show
are
the
the two that
decline of these
those are the
two
two
styles.
that I'm between right now. Like I said, it sucks that I can't have Memento or Training Day on there, but I'll hedge because it's a combined list. Because I forgot to put Donnie Darko in
I mean,
our
I do
combined
plan on seeing
choices.
those. I just, there's only so much time in
No,
a
no,
day.
I get it. But like I said, I want you to have just as many choices. Like I said,
Yeah.
I don't want this list to feel completely one-sided because again, it's
So what
both
else
of
do
our
you have
lists.
that I don't have that I can at least
It's
sort of maybe speak to the cultural?
Training Day, Memento. We already have Mulholland Drive on the list, Mulholland Drive and Harry Potter on the list, and yeah, everything else we have in common. So that's it. So that's why I want this last choice obviously has to be yours since you've given me so many. So I'd say just pick between Lara Croft and Rush Hour.
For me, it's got to be Rush Hour.
All right.
Both are great films, but
give
just
you
Rush Hour is just the second one, especially, man. I mean, just go and watch that film, guys, and there's so much special magic in that movie. That's for sure.
Definitely. So then so these are the movies that we have right now. So what's it called? So we have obviously our combined 6 that we had originally: Fellowship, Shrek, Monsters Inc., Amelie, Ocean's 11, and I forgot Donnie Darko. And then the other 4 that we decided on are Mulholland Drive, Black Hawk Down, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and Rush Hour 2. So how are we ranking those now?
Do you know what I say we do?
Yes.
And hear me out. I think we send them to our Instagram where we post the ranking tomorrow.
Okay. So oh no, well, I was already planning on doing that, but like as in like let the people decide on the rankings or like just
we decide and we surprise them tomorrow with the rankings.
We surprise them. Okay, so we discuss
that,
it
or do you want to do it
camera?
here? I know we're just winging it right now.
No, that's fine. I'm torn because like I want to do it here just for like posterity's sake, but at the same time that's also like
let's
really
just do
cool.
it here.
That would
we'll,
be
we'll
all right.
post it tomorrow. Let's just do it here. We'll figure out the format of these better as time goes on.
We'll figure it out later. But like I said, just as far as like experimenting around and figuring it out. So, like I said, so number 10. I feel that we can stick with Harry Potter at number 10. I feel like that's a good number 10 choice, just overall. It was already my number 10. It didn't even make your list, so just for that sake.
Okay. Sure. I mean, that's an easy plug there.
Yeah.
I mean, for number, is Jurassic Park on both of our lists?
No. Jurassic Park is not on either of our lists, and it's not on this
I was going to say, that'd be a good number 9.
We already have the 10, so it's just figuring out the order now.
With that being said, I think Rush Hour 2 could go in number 9.
Yeah, I already have it at number 9, so that works out perfectly. I want to put Fellowship at 1, just because I feel like between the both of us, I feel like it's the movie that kind of hit us emotionally both the hardest that year. Even if it's
we'll work our way up.
Okay,
we'll work our way up.
All right, so number 8 then. We got Black Hawk Down, Mulholland Drive, Donnie Darko, Ocean's 11, Amelie.
I think Donnie Darko's a solid number 8.
Donnie Darko's a number 8. Okay.
What do you think?
I want to put it higher, but I can't tell if that's like my personal bias versus the actual, impact of the movie. Again, it's a movie that obviously gained a cult following as time went on. It wasn't like a tremendous smash hit when it came out originally. So I personally think 8 is too low, but I don't think it should be like higher than 5, if that makes sense.
Sure. So what were you thinking would be 8?
I was thinking a perfect 5 would be good for that.
It's way too high for 5.
You think that's too high?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
It's not top 5.
Okay. So then number 7? Can we have? How about this? We put Donnie Darko at 7 and we put Mulholland at 8.
I love that. Let's do that.
That works. That works. Yeah, because I know you're going to want Black Hawk Down probably in the top 5, and I'll give you that. So we got that. Ocean's 11. Do we do that at 6 or should we put that higher?
Well, I do feel like that is a bottom half.
Okay,
film.
because I have Amelie, because we still have Amelie, Black Hawk Down, Monsters Inc., Shrek, and Fellowship.
Monsters Inc. for me would be 6.
Monsters Inc. would be 6? Got it.
Just because I think Ocean's 11 is a stronger film.
Got it.
So again, it's always hard to compare those types of mediums, but I think Ocean's 11 starts our top 5.
Got it.
In my mind. What do you think about that?
No, I agree with that. Personally, I still think that Ocean's 11 is even better than Black Hawk Down, but again, because I understand your love of that movie, so I'll compromise with Ocean's 11 at 5. That leaves Black Hawk Down, Amelie, Shrek, and Fellowship.
Yeah, so I mean, I want to say Shrek is next, but I want to hear what you have to say about that as well.
Oh no, I'm with you, because as far again, it's measuring out like the cultural impact versus our own individual thoughts, and I think it's safe to say that we both love this movie, but it's definitely not higher. It's definitely not that high on each of our individual lists, so I'm perfectly fine with putting Shrek at 4.
Mm-hmm. Same.
And then I say, so hear me out for the rest. I say we do Because again, this is a combined list, not our own individual list. I say we do Amelie at 3, Black Hawk Down at 2, and Fellowship at 1.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
All right. Awesome.
Cool. Let's read that list off.
The
man.
Combined, the official. This is what I like too, is that now we're gonna have each of our individual lists, and we're gonna have an official list. And the good thing is, for all of you guys who don't know, I'll make a graphic and post this on Instagram tomorrow, so that you guys will officially have the top 10 graphic burned into your guys' memories forever. So the official Talkin' TV top 10 movies that are turning 20. Drum roll. That was lame. Anyways, number 10. Harry Potter and the Sorcerers, or Philosophers, depending on what region of the world you're in. Stone. Number 9, Rush Hour 2. Number 8, Mulholland Drive. Number 7, Donnie Darko. Number 6, Monsters, Inc. Number 5, Ocean's 11. Number 4, Shrek. Number 3, Amelie. Number 2, Black Hawk Down. And number 1, Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. I'm very confident and very happy with that list overall. And Chris,
that's a damn good list.
That's a great list. That's a great list. Like I said, oh man, I'm so happy that we were able to do this. Like this is more of like kind of a fun experimental episode, but I'm glad that we did it, because I just, you know me, I love doing lists. I love ranking shit, and I love ranking shit with you, because I always love your takes that you have on certain of these movies in these decades. And I definitely think that this is a list that you had got a lot more out of than you were expecting to, I would say, probably.
Yeah, this is I hadn't realized rather how alert I was in this year until you asked me to look back on it, and I realized, wow, this is a good, for me, this is a great year for movies.
Yeah,
for
really
me personally,
good. Really good. Yeah.
So this is a fun time, man. I always enjoy these kind of change of the rhythm type of suggestions, in the sense where we're not covering today's hot topic, we're just having a little fun, and the chat clearly was hanging out tonight as well.
Yeah.
So
Jack came to play tonight, as far as I'm concerned. I was really impressed with those lists overall. Like, really, really impressed. So, I mean, again, it just shows the power of 2001. 2001, a more influential year than we give it credit for. So, people, I was about to say, if you loved this video, don't worry, because we got 2 more weeks worth of top 10 lists coming as far as the podcast goes, because we're officially beginning our end of the year 2020 wrap up. We're doing top 10 best TV shows of 2020 for next week, and the following week we're ending the month. We're doing it, finally doing it, top 10 movies of 2020. We're going to have our combined overall lists that we're going to have for each one of our ranked videos that we do together going forward, that we'll post for you on Instagram, because let's face it, we love doing top 10 lists. YouTube and the internet just loves top 10 lists, and so we're going to keep doing that as far as our content goes overall. So people, thank you once again for tuning in to yet another incredible episode of the Talkin' TV podcast. Thanks to all of you for continuing to just be so interactive, so much fun to be around. Just makes just everything that we do now so worth it, especially in these trying and very concerning times overall. Chris, you talk with the chat. You're better at it than I am. I usually just turn into like kind of a blubbering mess overall.
Yeah, guys, it really does mean a lot. I mean, we just had our 200 subscriber celebration last Friday, and now we're almost at 210. I mean, you guys just really don't stop, and that means so much to us. So we're here for you. We're going to be coming live to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday as much as we can this year, because, well, you guys give us the fire to keep going, man. So seriously, we say it a lot because we mean it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And with that being said, Dom,
we got a lot of stuff to look forward to as far as the rest of the week. This Friday, again, the big drop, another big Disney Plus drop. Again, we're coming back, people. We took a couple weeks off, obviously, but the recaps are coming back, because we're going to start doing WandaVision every week, every Friday, starting this Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the same time that we did for the Mandalorian rewatch. Oh, man, I'm interested, because, guys, the MCU is back after a year off from MCU property. The franchise that defined pop culture for the last 10 years is back, and it's certainly going to be an interesting ride. I'm very, very much looking forward to covering that, especially since they added on more episodes, and now apparently it's 9 episodes, and it's 9 weeks long, so...
Yeah, exactly. And thanks, Luke. We appreciate that, man. And yeah, guys, as you know, we always have guests for these bigger sort of series recaps. And should we say who's going to be joining us for the premiere?
Absolutely, Jeff.
Cool. So, guys, I love this dude, man. I'm glad to finally be on my channel with him at the same time. He helped us out in an emergency pinch a few weeks back.
Yes, he
We're
did.
going to be starting off our WandaVision recap series with the one and only Alex of Levels of the Geek. It's gonna be awesome, guys.
Yes.
It's every week we're going to try to bring a guest, and if we're not bringing a guest, Dom and I are going to be bringing our A game. Don't miss it. Dom, where can the people keep up to date with all that we do? You know, we're telling them all about it. Where can they find it?
Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Talkin TV Podcast. It helps because Chris has just made that graphic that just helps so much down there. And again, just smash that subscribe button. Overall, you guys came in clutch with the 200 subscribers last minute, and again, we're already almost up to 210, and just onward and upward always, as far as I'm concerned. Click the bell next to it to get notified every time we have new content. Leave a comment. Again, the chat was awesome tonight as far as their list, but again, for all the people who are going to find this video later on the YouTubes, leave your comments below as far as what your 10 favorite movies are from this, again, surprisingly incredible year for movies overall. And people, again, just thank you as always for being a part of us and for helping us as far as what we've been able to do since the beginning of this pandemic. Again, we're in season 3 right now. We're only going to keep going strong. And as always, Chris, 12 seasons and a short film.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So with that being said, thank you all. Have a good and safe night. We'll see you on Friday for the beginning of WandaVision, and we'll see you in the next couple weeks as we give you guys our wrap-ups for our favorite content from the end of last year, since we're going to be caught up officially by then. And with that being said, as always, there's the camera. Watch more fucking movies and TV. We out.